Alexander Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city pulse with life 40 stories below. As the amber whiskey in his crystal tumbler reflected the dying sunset, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation that had shattered his carefully constructed world. Just hours earlier, his father's voice echoed in his memory, cold and unforgiving as always. "You'll marry Victoria Sinclair within 6 months, or you'll lose everything. The will is ironclad, Alexander. No marriage, no inheritance, no company." Alexander had built Cross Industries from near bankruptcy after his father's stroke 5 years ago, transforming it into a tech empire worth billions. The old man had watched from his wheelchair, silent and calculating, never once offering praise or acknowledgement. Now, even from his deathbed, Harrison Cross was pulling the strings. The penthouse door chimed softly, and his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Cross, Miss Sinclair has arrived." Alexander turned, straightening his tie. Victoria Sinclair was the daughter of his father's oldest business partner, a woman he'd met briefly at various corporate functions over the years. Beautiful, intelligent, and completely untouchable. She'd never given him more than polite conversation and a practiced smile. When she walked into his living room, Alexander felt his breath catch. Victoria moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being watched, her emerald dress hugging her curves in all the right places. Her dark hair cascaded over one shoulder, and her green eyes held a mixture of defiance and resignation that intrigued him. "Alexander," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "I assume you know why I'm here." "My father's final manipulation," he replied, gesturing toward the seating area. "Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink? Bourbon, neat?" She settled onto the leather sofa, crossing her legs with deliberate elegance. "I suppose we should discuss the terms of this arrangement." Alexander poured her drink, studying her carefully. "You seem remarkably calm for someone being forced into marriage." Victoria accepted the glass, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. "I've known this day would come since I was 18. Our fathers have been planning this merger for years, and we're simply the final pieces of their puzzle. You're willing to go through with it." She took a sip of bourbon, her eyes never leaving his. "I have my reasons. But I need to know something first, Alexander. There are rumors about you, about your expectations regarding marriage." Alexander's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what she was referring to. The gossip columns loved to speculate about his personal life, particularly his rumored obsession with purity and virtue in women. It was a reputation he'd neither confirmed nor denied, finding it useful to maintain an air of mystery. "What kind of expectations?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "The kind that would make a marriage arrangement very complicated for most women." Victoria set down her glass and leaned forward slightly. "I've heard you've made certain vows about the woman you'd eventually marry. Something about divorce being inevitable if she didn't meet your particular standards." Yes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Had indeed made such statements, both publicly and privately. In a world where everyone seemed to have a past, he'd declared he would only marry a woman who had saved herself completely for marriage. It was old-fashioned, perhaps even archaic, but it was his line in the sand. "And what if I told you those rumors were true?" he asked quietly. Victoria's lips curved into a smile that was both mysterious and challenging. "Then I'd say you might be surprised by what you discover about me, Alexander Cross." She stood, smoothing down her dress. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow, but I want you to consider something. Marriage based on our father's wishes is one thing, but marriage based on unrealistic expectations and ultimatums is quite another. If we do this, it will be as equals or not at all." As she moved toward the door, Alexander found himself following. "Victoria, wait." She turned, eyebrow raised. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I want you to know that I respect your position in all of this. Neither of us asked for this situation." No, she agreed, "but perhaps we can make it work to both our advantages." "Good evening, Alexander." After she left, Alexander returned to his window, his mind racing. Victoria Sinclair was nothing like the docile, traditional woman he'd always imagined marrying. She was fierce, independent, and clearly had her own agenda. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Your father wasn't the only one with conditions. If you want to know more about mine, meet me at the plaza tomorrow at 8. Come alone." V. Alexander stared at the message, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine uncertainty. Victoria Sinclair was about to turn his carefully ordered world upside down, and despite everything, he found himself looking forward to it. The Plaza's oak room was nearly empty at 8 in the evening, exactly as Victoria had planned. She sat in a corner booth, nursing a glass of wine and watching the entrance. When Alexander arrived, she noted the way he scanned the room, his businessman's instincts alert even in this setting. He slid into the seat across from her, his steel-gray eyes intense in the dim lighting. "You're full of surprises, Miss Sinclair." "Victoria," she corrected. "And you haven't seen anything yet?" Alexander signaled the waiter for a drink, then leaned back, studying her. "So what are these conditions you mentioned?" Victoria opened her purse and withdrew a thick envelope, sliding it across the table. A contract. "My lawyers drew it up this afternoon." Alexander's eyebrows rose as he opened the envelope and began reading. The document was comprehensive, outlining everything from financial arrangements to public appearances. But it was the personal clauses that made him look up sharply. "You want separate bedrooms? I want separate lives," Victoria clarified. "This marriage will be a business arrangement, nothing more. We'll present a united front in public, attend the necessary social functions together. But behind closed doors, we maintain complete autonomy and intimacy." Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Not unless we both want it, and certainly not because some antiquated contract demands it." Alexander set the papers down, his expression unreadable. "You realize, my father's will requires the marriage to be legitimate in every sense. There will be scrutiny, investigations possibly. This appears to be a sham marriage. Then we'll be very good actors when necessary." Victoria leaned forward, her green eyes blazing. "But I won't be owned, Alexander. Not by my father, not by your father's ghost, and certainly not by you." The waiter brought Alexander's scotch, and he took a long sip, processing her words. "There's something else, isn't there? Something you're not telling me." Victoria's composure wavered for just a moment. "There's always something, Alexander. The question is whether you're prepared to handle the truth. Try me." She reached into her purse again, this time withdrawing a small photograph. Showed a little girl, perhaps. 4 years old, with Victoria's dark hair and green eyes. Alexander's breath caught. "You have a child. Her name is Sophie. She lives with my sister in London." Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. "My father doesn't know about her, and I intend to keep it that way. The father is gone, has been since the day I told him I was pregnant." Victoria took the photograph back, her fingers trembling slightly. "I was 19, naive, and completely in love with someone who saw me as nothing more than a conquest." Alexander felt something shift inside his chest, an unfamiliar emotion he couldn't quite name. "Victoria, I don't." She held up a hand.
"I don't."
"Say you're sorry, don't say it doesn't matter, and definitely don't say it changes things between us. I'm telling you, because if we do this, there can't be any secrets that could destroy us later. Does this have anything to do with your father forcing this marriage?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "My father thinks he's securing my future by tying me to the Cross Empire. What he doesn't realize is that I've been building my own empire, quietly, carefully, for the past 6 years. This marriage gives me the final piece I need, which is legitimacy in his eyes. Once I'm married to you, I become a respectable woman in his antiquated worldview. That's when I make my move." Alexander leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "What kind of move? The kind that will make Sinclair Industries mine, not his." Victoria's smile was predatory. "You see, Alexander, while you've been building your tech empire, I've been quietly acquiring shares in my father's company through shell corporations and dummy accounts. I'm currently at 43% ownership. And marriage to me gets you the rest? Marriage to you gets me respectability, which gets me board support, which gets me control. Victoria finished her wine. The irony is delicious, don't you think? He's using our marriage to control me, while I'm using it to destroy him. Alexander stared at her, reassessing everything he thought he knew about Victoria Sinclair. You're not the innocent society princess everyone thinks you are. And you're not the cold, calculating business machine your reputation suggests. Victoria stood, leaving the contract on the table. We both have our masks, Alexander. The question is whether we're brave enough to take them off. As she moved to leave, Alexander caught her wrist gently. Victoria, about your daughter? What about her? If we do this, she'll be part of our lives eventually. I want you to know that doesn't change anything for me. Victoria studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. Why? Because, Alexander said quietly, I think I'm beginning to understand that the woman I thought I wanted to marry doesn't exist. And the woman standing in front of me is far more interesting than any fantasy I could have imagined. Victoria felt her carefully. Constructed walls waver. It wasn't part of her plan. She was supposed to remain detached, clinical, focused on her goals. Now she wasn't supposed to feel this flutter in her chest when he looked at her like that. Read the contract, she said, pulling away gently. If you can agree to my terms, we'll do this. If not, then we'll both find another way to get what we want. After she left, Alexander sat alone, staring at the contract. Every clause was designed to protect her, to maintain her independence while giving him what he needed to satisfy his father's will. It was brilliant, actually, and completely unexpected. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from his. Private investigator background check complete on Victoria Sinclair. You're not going to believe what I found. Call me. Alexander stared at the message, then at the contract, then at the photograph Victoria had left behind on the table. A little girl with her mother's eyes, unaware that her existence was about to change everything. He pocketed the photo and made his decision. 3 weeks later, Alexander stood at the altar of St. Mark's Cathedral, watching Victoria walk down the aisle in a stunning ivory gown that had made headlines in every fashion magazine. The media called it the wedding of the century, a merger of two business dynasties wrapped in romantic fantasy. Only Alexander and Victoria knew the truth as she reached him. Victoria's eyes met his briefly. He saw the same mixture of determination and uncertainty he'd been feeling since signing. Her contract 2 weeks earlier? The phone call from his investigator had revealed layers to Victoria's story that made her even more intriguing. But he'd kept those discoveries to himself. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows, rings, and photographs. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was brief but thorough enough to satisfy the cameras. Victoria's lips were soft, her response genuine despite their arrangement, and for a moment, I almost forgot this was all pretense. The reception at the Metropolitan Museum was a display of wealth and power that would be talked about for months. Alexander and Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease, playing their roles perfectly. To everyone watching, they were the ideal couple, successful, beautiful, and completely devoted to each other. You're quite the actress, Alexander, murmured as they danced to the string quartet. I had a good teacher, Victoria replied, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Your performance has been flawless as well. It doesn't feel like performance right now. Victoria's step faltered slightly. Alexander, I know this wasn't part of the plan. His hand tightened on her waist. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't affected by you. Before Victoria could respond, her father appeared beside them, his face flushed with champagne and satisfaction. My beautiful daughter, Winston Sinclair boomed, finally settled with a proper husband. Alexander, you're getting quite the prize. Victoria's always mean-spirited, but marriage will settle her down nicely. Victoria's jaw clenched, but her smile never wavered. Thank you, Daddy. I'm sure Alexander and I will be very happy together. See that you are, Winston said, his tone carrying an edge that made Alexander's eyes narrow. Marriage is about duty, Victoria. Don't forget that. After Winston walked away, Victoria's composure cracked slightly. He has no idea what's coming. She whispered, "When do you make your move?" "Soon. I've been waiting for the right moment, and our marriage provides the perfect cover." Victoria looked up at him. "I hope you're prepared for the fallout when it happens. I can handle your father's anger. It's not just my father I'm worried about." Victoria's expression grew serious. "When I take control of Sinclair Industries, there will be casualties. People who've been loyal to my father for decades will lose their positions. The media will tear us apart, looking for any scandal they can find." "Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Alexander considered her words. "Victoria, there's something I need to tell you. Something my investigator discovered." Her face went pale. "What? Your father knows about Sophie?" The color drained completely from Victoria's face. "That's impossible. I've been so careful. He's known for years. He's been having you watched, waiting for the right moment to use that information." Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "He's planning to blackmail you with it if you try to move against him." Victoria stopped dancing, her hand gripping his arm. "How do you know this?" "Because he approached me 3 days ago. He wanted to make sure I understood what kind of woman I was marrying." Alexander's expression darkened. "He suggested I might." "Want to reconsider the arrangement once I learned about your indiscretions?" "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that my wife's past was none of his business, and if he ever threatened you or Sophie again, I'd destroy him myself." Victoria stared at him, stunned. "You defended me?" "Why? Because you're my wife now, arrangement or not. Because what he was suggesting was despicable." Alexander's voice was low, intense. "No one threatens my family." The word family hung between them, loaded with implications neither had expected. Victoria felt tears threaten, but she blinked them back. "Alexander, I thank you. There's more. Your sister called this morning. Sophie's been asking about you, wondering why she can't come visit. She's old enough now to understand that something's not right." Victoria's resolve crumbled. "I've been trying to protect her, but I'm just making everything worse, aren't I? Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Alexander took her hand. "Maybe it's time to bring her home. My father will use her against me." "Not if we get to him first." Alexander's smile was predatory. "You said you needed respectability to make your move. Well, Mrs. Cross, you have it now. You have something else you didn't have before." "What's that?" "A partner who has just as much to gain from seeing your father fall as you do." Victoria looked at him with new understanding. "This isn't just about helping me anymore, is it? Your father made a mistake when he threatened you. He made it personal." Alexander's eyes were steel. "I don't take kindly to people who attack my wife." Reception continued around them. But Victoria felt as though the world had shifted. This marriage was supposed to be simple, a business arrangement that served both their purposes. Instead, she found herself with a husband who was willing to go to war for her, in a situation that was becoming far more complicated than she'd anticipated. "There's something else," Alexander said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about my father's will." "What now?" "The marriage requirement isn't the only condition. We have to produce an heir within 2 years, or I lose everything anyway." Victoria's breath caught. "An heir. I didn't mention it before because I didn't want to pressure you. I thought maybe we could figure something out, adopt maybe, or we could have a real marriage." The suggestion hung between them, dangerous and tempting. Alexander searched her face. "Is that what you want?" Victoria looked around the room at all the people celebrating their union, at the life they were supposed to build together, at the future that was suddenly full of possibilities she hadn't considered. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know I don't want to lose you to some antiquated inheritance clause. We'll figure it out." As the evening wound down, Victoria and Alexander retired to his penthouse, now officially their shared home. The separate bedrooms clause in their contract suddenly seemed less important than the connection growing between them. "Alexander," Victoria said as they stood in the hallway between their rooms, "about tonight?" "We stick to the agreement," he said quietly. "Nothing changes unless we both want it to." Victoria nodded, but as she went to her room, she found herself wishing things were different. For the first time in years, she wanted something more than revenge and independence. She wanted the man she'd just married to be more than just her Bocina's partner. She wanted him to be her partner in everything. 2 months into their marriage, Victoria stood in Alexander's study, her hands shaking as she held the phone. Sophie's voice, sweet and curious, filled the room through the speaker. "Mummy, when can I come out to see you? Aunt Emma says you have a new house and a husband now. Does that mean I can have a daddy too?" Victoria closed her eyes, her heart breaking. Soon, sweetheart, very soon. After ending the call, she found Alexander watching her from the doorway. Their relationship had evolved over the past weeks, the carefully maintained distance, gradually dissolving into something neither had anticipated. "How long since you've seen her?" he asked gently. 8 months. I keep making excuses, but she's getting older, asking more questions. Victoria sank into one of the leather chairs. "I'm a coward, Alexander. I'm terrified of what bringing her into this world will mean." Alexander moved to the window, his expression thoughtful. "What if I told you that your father's already made his move?" Victoria's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "My sources tell me he's been in contact with several board members. It's suggesting that your marriage to me proves you've finally matured enough to take on more responsibility at Sinclair Industries. He's planning to offer you a position on the board next week, a position he can control." "Exactly. But what he doesn't know is that I've been buying up shares through my own shell companies. Between your 43% and my newly acquired 12%, we have majority control." Victoria stared at him. "You've been planning this behind my back?" "I've been planning this with you in mind," Alexander corrected. "The question is, are you ready to pull the trigger?" Victoria stood, pacing to the window. "If we do this, there's no going back. My father will cut me off completely. The scandal will be enormous. And if we don't do this, you'll spend the rest of your life under his control, and Sophie will grow up thinking her mother abandoned her." The truth hit Victoria like a physical blow. "You're right. God help me. You're right." Alexander moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "There's something else, Victoria. Something I should have told you weeks ago." She turned in his arms, noting the serious expression on his face. "What?" "I never made that vow. It's one about divorcing my wife if she wasn't pure. It was a rumor started by a vindictive ex-girlfriend and perpetuated by the media because it made good copy." Victoria's breath caught. "But you never denied it, because it served my purposes to have people think I was impossibly demanding. It kept away the fortune hunters and social climbers." Alexander's hands cupped her face. "The truth is, I've been waiting my entire life for someone real, someone who could match me in strength and intelligence. Someone like you, Alexander. I love you, Victoria. I love your fierce independence, your brilliant mind, your determination to protect your daughter. I love the way you challenge me, the way you make me want to be better than I am." Victoria felt her world tilt. This wasn't supposed to happen. We're supposed to stay detached. "I know. But somewhere between your contract negotiations and watching you worry about Sophie, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with my wife." Before Victoria could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her father's name. "Answer it, Alexander," said quietly. "It's time." Victoria accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Daddy, Victoria, darling. Hope you and Alexander are settling into married life well. I have wonderful news. The board has agreed to offer you the position of Executive Vice President. Isn't that exciting?" "Very exciting," Victoria replied, her voice steady. "When would this start?" "Immediately. There's just one small matter we need to discuss first. I've received some disturbing information about your past, and I want to make sure it won't be a problem going forward." Alexander's jaw clenched, but Victoria remained composed. "What kind of information?" "It's the kind that could be very embarrassing for the family if it came to light. But don't worry, darling. As long as you're willing to be reasonable about your role in the company, I'm sure we can keep any unfortunate secrets buried." Victoria met Alexander's eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. "Actually, Daddy, I think it's time those secrets came to light." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I have some information the board needs to hear about the company's future direction." "Victoria, you don't have the authority to call a board meeting." "Actually, I do. As the majority shareholder, I have every right." Victoria's voice grew stronger. With each word, and as the majority shareholder, I'm also announcing my intention to assume the role of CEO, effective immediately. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Winston's voice came through, cold and threatening. You have no idea what you're doing, Victoria. I'll destroy you. You can try, Victoria replied calmly. But I think you'll find I'm much stronger than you gave me credit for. Goodbye, Daddy. She ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Emma, it's Victoria. I need you to put Sophie on the next flight to New York. It's time for her to come home. Alexander pulled Victoria into his arms, and this time she didn't resist. Are you sure about this? He asked. No, she admitted, but I'm sure about us. I'm sure about Sophie. And I'm sure that I'm tired of living in fear. Alexander kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, pouring all of his love and admiration into the contact. When they broke apart, Victoria was breathless.
There's
One more thing, she said quietly. About that heir clause in your father's will. Alexander's eyes darkened. Victoria, you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. I want everything with you, Alexander. The real marriage, the family, the future we could build together. But first, I need to know something. Anything. When you find out about my past, about the mistakes I made, about Sophie's father, will you still love me? Alexander's answer was immediate and unwavering. I'll love you more for having the strength to survive it all and come out stronger. Your past made you who you are, Victoria, and who you are is exactly who I want to spend the rest of my life with. Victoria felt the last of her walls crumble. Then let's go to war, husband, and let's build something beautiful from the ashes. As they stood together, looking out at the city that would soon know their names for entirely new reasons, Victoria realized that sometimes the best plans were the ones that fell apart completely, leaving room for something infinitely better to take their place. Tomorrow would bring battles, scandals, and challenges they couldn't even imagine. But tonight, for the first time in her adult life, Victoria Cross was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the boardroom of Sinclair Industries, her hand resting protectively on her barely visible baby bump as she addressed the assembled executives. The hostile takeover had been brutal but successful, and her father's empire was now officially hers. The restructuring is complete, she announced, her voice carrying the authority she'd fought so hard to claim. Sinclair Industries will be moving in a new direction, one focused on innovation rather than exploitation. Through the glass wall, she could see Alexander waiting in her office, Sophie on his lap as they worked on her homework together. The little girl had taken to her new stepfather immediately. Watching them together never failed to make Victoria's heart swell. The board members filed out, some still resentful of the change in leadership, others excited about the company's new direction. Victoria had expected the resistance, but she'd also expected the ultimate acceptance once they saw her results. Mummy, Sophie called out as Victoria entered her office. Alexander helped me with my math, and look what I drew, Victoria examined. The crayon drawing of a family standing in front of a house, complete with a small dog she'd been begging for. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Who's this? She asked, pointing to a tiny figure in the woman's arms. That's my baby brother or sister, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Alexander says babies are really small at first, but they grow bigger in your tummy. Victoria met Alexander's amused gaze over Sophie's head. Did he now? She asked direct. Questions, Alexander said, standing and moving to embrace his wife. I gave her appropriate answers. Any regrets about inheriting a ready-made family? Victoria asked as Sophie returned to her coloring. Only that I didn't meet you sooner, Alexander replied, his hands settling on her waist. How did the meeting go? Better than expected? The transition is finally complete. Victoria leaned into his warmth. Winston tried one last power play through his lawyer this morning, but it failed spectacularly. And how are you feeling about it all? Victoria considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have felt only satisfaction at her father's defeat. Now, she felt something more complex, a mixture of sadness for the relationship they could have had in relief that Sophie would never experience the manipulation she had endured. "Free," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely free." Alexander's phone buzzed with a message, and he glanced at it with a frown. "The investigator I hired to look into Sophie's father just sent an update." Victoria tensed. Despite their happiness, the shadow of Sophie's paternity had remained a concern. The man who had abandoned Victoria when she was pregnant had recently resurfaced, apparently aware of her new wealth and status. "What does he want?" Victoria asked quietly. "Money is expected, but there's more. He's threatening to go to the media with his story if we don't pay him off." Victoria felt a familiar surge of protective fury. "Over my dead body." "That's not necessary," Alexander said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've taken care of it." "How?" "Let's just say that when you dig deep enough into someone's past, you usually find things they'd prefer to keep buried. James Morrison will not be bothering our family again." Victoria stared at her husband, seeing the steel beneath his gentle exterior. "You really are ruthless when you need to be, aren't you? When it comes to protecting you and Sophie?" "Absolutely." Alexander's expression softened. "Made the mistake of threatening the two most important people in my world." "Three," Victoria corrected, placing his hand on her stomach. "Three most important people." Alexander's smile was radiant. "Three," he agreed. Sophie looked up from her drawing. "You talking about the baby again? Because I already told everyone at school that I'm going to be the best big sister ever." "Certainly are," Victoria said, lifting her daughter onto her lap despite her growing bump. "What else did you tell them at school?" "I told them that my real daddy finally came home, and that he loves my mummy so much that he married her and gave me his name, and now we're a proper family." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. The adoption papers had been finalized just last week, making Sophie officially Sophie Cross. Alexander had insisted on it, wanting to ensure that she was legally protected as his daughter in every way that mattered. "What did your teacher say about that?" Alexander asked. "She said that families come in all different shapes, but the most important thing is that they love each other." Sophie looked between her parents. "We love each other, right?" "It's more than you could possibly imagine," Victoria assured her. As the afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The marriage that was supposed to be a cold business arrangement had become the foundation for a love story she never could have scripted. Alexander had kept his promise to love her completely, past and all. He'd stood by her through the media circus of the takeover, the revelation of Sophie's existence, and all the challenges that came with blending their complicated lives. "Mrs. Cross," Alexander said formally, "your chariot awaits." "My chariot?" "I may have arranged for us to take a long weekend at the house in the Hamptons. Just the three of us. No business calls, no meetings, no obligations, except to enjoy being a family." Victoria felt the last knot of tension in her chest dissolve. "That sounds perfect." As they gathered their things to leave, Victoria caught sight of her reflection in the office window. The woman looking back at her was confident, successful, and genuinely happy. She was nothing like the frightened girl who had been forced into marriage 6 months earlier, and everything like the woman she'd always had the potential to become. "Ready?" Alexander asked, taking Sophie's hand. "Ready," Victoria confirmed, taking his other hand, as they walked out of Sinclair Industries. Together, Victoria realized that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful endings. Her father's manipulation had been meant to control her, but instead, it had given her everything she'd ever wanted: love, family, and the freedom to be herself completely. The vow that had started it all, the threat of divorce based on impossible standards, had been nothing more than a rumor. But the vow she and Alexander had made to each other, to love and protect their family, no matter what challenges came their way, was the most real and powerful promise of her life. 6 months pregnant with their first child together, mother to the daughter who called Alexander daddy without hesitation, CEO of her own empire, and wife to the man who saw her strength as her greatest beauty, Victoria Cross finally had everything she'd never dared to dream possible. And as Alexander helped Sophie into the car while keeping a protective hand on Victoria's back, she knew that their story was just beginning. The end.